Oh, man, what if I told you that before the 2022 NFL season, Geno Smith, quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, would be one of the most important players in fantasy football? You would have thought I was a legitimate crazy person, Vignesh. And for this episode, he is one of the 10 players that we have identified as some of the most important and influential players in all of fantasy football. We're going to be talking about him and 9 other players today. Welcome into the Pretend GM Fantasy Football Show. It's episode 4. I'm Alfredo Brown. You can follow me on Twitter at the Pretend GM. I am joined by the Doctor of Delight, the Vigosaurus Rex, Dr. Vig Nash Doraswamy. You can follow him on Twitter at Dr. Vig. We're recording this on Monday morning, October 10th. By the way, happy Indigenous Peoples Day to everyone celebrating out there. Vig, how are you on this fine Monday morning?
I am wonderful. Really excited because my Jags are just the best team on the planet and my Arsenal is playing really poorly. That's exactly how I'm feeling.
So, yeah, I noticed you're wearing an Arsenal soccer or football jersey, however, you say it. What's their mask? Are they the Cannons? What is their mascot? What is that?
I'm checking. The mascot is a T-Rex. We call him Gunnersaurus, but we have cannons. We do have cannons. We're called the Gunners. And no, Arsenal has been fantastic and top of the table, and the Jaguars are just sucking my soul dry at the moment.
That sounds about right. All right, so today we're going to be giving you our usual, the rehab roundup. Vig's going to analyze injuries in the NFL right now and how they're affecting your fantasy teams, and we're going to continue with our macro data refinement. The cool thing about this segment is that we can just kind of mesh it to whatever topic we want to talk about. And so today we're going to take the data that has just been accumulating over these first 5 weeks here and discuss the players that we feel are the 10 most important players in fantasy football all across that landscape right now. But before we get into that, I just want to remind everybody, take just a brief moment right now. Smash that like button on this episode. Subscribe to the Footballguys YouTube channel. And if you have a question for week 6, whether it's start, sit, waivers, trades, anything like that, ask it in the comments. We've been getting back to pretty much every single one of these throughout the week. We had a ton of comments last week, and we were able to get back to each of them. Also, we have an audio version of this podcast you can listen to in the car, at home, wherever you'd like. The link for that is in the description down below. Leave a 5-star rating and review. But Vig, without any further ado, we've done all the housekeeping. Let's get to the rehab roundup. All right, so I have been told to stop doing the rehab roundup voice. This did not come from anyone at Footballguys. This has come from a few people in the comments who have said the voice is it's not funny. It's not funny. It's actually quite annoying. So I think I'm just going to stop doing the voice. What do you think, Vig?
A lot of folks actually said they enjoyed the voice, so it's kind of 50-50 in the comment section. At this point, I don't even care. I just want to talk about
You're damn right, Vig. I'm never going to stop doing the voice. If you don't like the voice, you just unsubscribe to the show. But welcome into the rehab roundup, Dr. Vig. I kind of turned a little bit into a WWE wrestler here. I'm not sure what's going on. Got way too excited. Let's talk about our first player, Dameon Pierce, running back for the New England Patriots.
All right, and this is going to be the sort of general theme for everybody that we talk about. Is for a lot of these folks, it's still very unclear. We moved from recording from Sunday to Monday in hopes that we could have more information, but obviously that information doesn't come out Monday morning. But we do know that Dameon Pierce has hurt his hamstring. Some of the details are still unclear. Depending on what it is, he's a young guy. He might be able to come back and play in week 6, but he might not. Look forward to what happens there. And if he doesn't, what do you make of Ramondre Stevenson?
Well, I think that he could be a possible... Oh, I'm sorry. I spoke regular voice. What am I doing? I think Ramondre Stevenson is possible top 15 running back next week. If there's no Dameon Pierce, you just got to let the big boy go out there, run, catch his passes, and he's starting running back in the NFL next week. Yeehaw. Let's get to our next player, who unfortunately no longer starting running back in the NFL. It's Rashad Penny, running back for the Seattle Seahawks.
Poor guy. So he fractured one of his major load-bearing bones, a tibia in his leg. He's likely out for the entire season and then some. I think, you probably agree with me. Ken Walker now becomes a priority waiver wire add if he is not already rostered.
Oh, yeah, we going to talk about Ken Walker a whole bunch in this episode. Let's get to our next player here, and that's James Conner, running back for them Arizona Cardinals out in the desert.
Unfortunately, I still don't have too much extra information for you here. We know that he had some sort of rib injury. It's still sort of unclear. This could be the sort of thing that keeps him out. Might be able to play a little bit with the brace. We'll find out more as the week progresses. There is a chance Conner could play, but he might not.
Yeah, I really can't keep doing that voice for so long. It hurts. It hurts. I
I can
can't do it.
barely
But
hear it.
so Daryl Williams and Jonathan Ward also got hurt in this game. Benjamin becomes a name just to kind of monitor waiver wire, wise. If he's already in your team, awesome. Like you were prepared. But going forward, Benjamin is a guy to take a look at. I'm going to use the voice sparingly. So let's talk about a cowboy, a real cowboy, the sheriff in Dallas, Dak Prescott.
The current sheriff in Dallas happens to be Cooper Rush, but Dak Prescott had surgery a little over a month ago, or just under a month ago, on September 12th for his thumb. He is eyeing now what we're thinking is a week 7-ish return, so maybe misses another week as well. For what it's worth, Jerry Jones said there is absolutely zero QB controversy, even though Cooper Rush has pretty much taken the squad undefeated. He said that, and it makes sense that when they are ready to come back, or when he is ready to come back, Dak Prescott will be the starting quarterback, but probably not this next week. So hold on to Cooper Rush for at least one more week.
What I love is that he said this after he actually said, well, there may be a little quarterback controversy. Dak's going to have to earn that spot back. And then he had to walk
Immediately
it
after,
back.
yeah.
He had to walk it back after everyone else told him not to. All right, let's get to the second to last player here. And that's Michael Thomas, wide receiver for them New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, by all accounts, after his little foot turf toe injury, it sounds like Michael Thomas should be back. We saw what Michael Thomas could do from a fantasy standpoint in week 1, grab you a couple of touchdowns. He's an older wide receiver. We've always had some challenges with his health. Last year, if you heard our show, we said, dude, do not draft him at all. I don't think he's going to be great. All of this to say, it's hard to know what to make of him and how he's going to be, but in an injury-ravaged squad where Olave might still be out with the concussion or might be back, it's hard to say. You still, Landry, still things are a little unclear. Basically, that Saints squad from quarterback to wide receiver to tight end everywhere is either injury ravaged or just is not playing well at all. So Michael Thomas coming back, if he's not rostered, might be someone worth picking up just to see what he maybe do in the coming weeks. But again, not very excited about anything really on that Saints squad.
And I think there's something here also to kind of unearth, and that's just how the concussion protocol is changing going forward, Vig, and how much extra caution is being taken. We saw Isaiah McKenzie for the Bills didn't play this week. Basically, any player that suffered any kind of head injury or what appeared to be a head injury or some sort of a trauma in that that realm, they did not return to games. And the NFL seems to be taking a very staunch stance on this after the whole Tua Tagovailoa debacle. So I don't know that Vig. I mean, you could tell me this. I don't know how possible it is we even see Chris Olave back next week.
Yeah, this is the challenging thing. Honestly, so though I'm an adult doctor and a lot of the stuff I talk about on the show is from my adult experience, I'm also a pediatric doctor.
Okay, I totally misunderstood when you're like adult doctor. It's like,
oh, you thought I was like
what's the other
anti-Doogie Howser?
Yeah,
no, but I'm also a pediatrician, right? And that's what I'm getting at. In pediatrics, we deal a lot with concussions and concussion and return to play protocol. And some of these protocols, like we take kids out of their sports for weeks at a time and do this graded return to play. If you Google return to play for the NFL, you will see like phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Most of these folks do not come back for a few weeks when we're talking about kids who get concussions while they're playing. The same stuff is what we're supposed to be using for our adult super athletes as well, regardless of the league. The NFL, I think, is really trying to move towards that, given all the CTE, the recent, as you said, Tua Tagovailoa debacle. I think, between that and the NFLPA really wanting to make sure that the players are okay, we may see that they are more strictly adhering to what has sort of been the general concussion guideline in the rest of medicine. So you're right. We may not see Olave come back, because to come back and play would mean that he is going to come back in less than 7 days or 7 days from his injury. So we'll have to monitor, but I think we'll see a lot of folks perhaps miss the week after their concussion as well moving forward.
Final player here on the roundup, Keenan Allen, wide receiver for them Los Angeles Chargers.
I'm just going to lump Keenan Allen in with a couple of other guys because there is still so much lack of clarity here. So Keenan Allen hurt his hamstring week 1. These sort of soft tissue muscle injuries can be really hard on older players, which I hate saying, given that both of us are like 3 to 4 years older than Keenan Allen. So
whoa, easy, Chief.
But as a relatively older player who is struggling after a week 1 injury, it's hard to say what is to come. He could be back this next week. He might not. And I'm sorry we're being so vague. We just do not know. So watch the injury reports carefully. Keenan Allen, we know, is like an easy wide receiver 1 to 2, depending on, when he comes in and how he's playing. But other unclear sort of situations, I guess, would be like T. Higgins, who also sort of has had this hamstring injury, plus maybe a lingering ankle injury, and Tyreek Hill, who we saw in a walking boot for a bit of that game. So these guys, we don't know what's happening yet. Obviously, you're not going to dump them and just drop them from your team, but keep a close eye on the injury reports as they come in through the week, because we still have to monitor what's going to happen. We don't know yet.
All right, that's the rehab roundup with Dr. Vig. Let's get to our macro data refinement series.
Macro data refinement.
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 Today, we're talking about the 10 most important players for the rest of the season. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be the 10 best performing players. But these are 10 players that we've identified that could have some of the greatest impact across the fantasy landscape. And Vig, I want to start out with the player that we teased early in the show, and it's Geno Smith. Okay. Geno Smith, we're at the point where when can we say that he's for real? Because I'm ready to believe in Seattle. I think that he needs to be an every week starter over guys like Matt Stafford. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, Vig, Trevor Lawrence, maybe even over Russell Wilson. He's showing that he has been the better player. And just to give you that contrast, Geno Smith responsible for 10 touchdowns. The Broncos team as a whole, 6 touchdowns. Okay, that's courtesy of Ian Hartitz. I want to be really excited about Geno Smith, but I don't know. Like, should I be tempering my expectations? What do we do here?
You should temper your expectations because you have cursed him. We said Jared Goff was going to be great, and look what happened to him now. So, guys, do not do anything with Geno Smith. He is going to be horrible next week. I don't even know who he's playing next week yet. But no, honestly, look, all jokes aside, Geno Smith is doing a great job using his weapons, right? Metcalf and Lockett are each getting, greater than a quarter of the target share, 25% for Lockett, 27% for Metcalf. There is a reason Geno Smith, who's playing very efficiently, has the best passer rating in the NFL. And moving forward, their strength of schedule, based on what's happened so far, is the 10th easiest. So Geno Smith has been playing well. He's got great weapons. We'll have to see how he can, utilize Ken Walker, who I think we'll talk about shortly. But he is doing great from both the fantasy perspective as well as a real team quarterback perspective. And unlike this Jared Goff situation, I think Geno Smith will continue to do reasonably well as the season progresses.
And this is just cool to see. Like, this is the guy that he was at West Virginia. It never really came to fruition here in the NFL and throughout all of his different stops. And listen, over the last 2 weeks, he has been the QB2 in fantasy, just 5 points behind Josh Allen. He's the quarterback 5 currently. And I think for the rest of the season, he needs to be treated as a top 12 quarterback, unless we see otherwise, right? Unless there's a bunch of other quarterbacks that just start to play really well and Geno starts to simmer down. But I think it's very reasonable to say that Geno Smith, a guy who was free in your drafts, you didn't even have to draft him. You just pick him up because nobody wanted to draft him. We didn't even know who the starting quarterback was. He is a player that could be winning a lot of people their championships. The late round quarterback strategy people who didn't really try for one, or maybe that person that drafted a Matt Stafford and it didn't work out well. Geno Smith is one of those players, especially here at the quarterback position, that's been so kind of inconsistent. He could be saving a lot of people's seasons. Vig, let's get to our next player. Same team, Seattle Seahawks. It's Ken Walker, the third running back for Seattle.
Look, we both love Ken Walker. When we used to talk a lot more Dynasty on other shows, and if you follow Alfredo on Twitter, Ken Walker was, our number 1 rated running back for both of us, which I know is a little controversial with Breece Hall, but we just after the draft, we just liked his situation a lot. This is not how we wanted it to happen, of course, but we know he's extraordinarily talented. We know he can do everything. He can play all 3 downs. But what was Rashad Penny doing? He was getting 60% of that rushing workload before his injury, and now we know that Rashad's going to be out for the rest of the season. We saw that Ken Walker got practically 90% of the snaps after Penny's injury, so that we've already seen sort of what happens, though it wasn't a full game. He really should, moving forward, Walker should get nearly all of the early down work. And, probably anywhere from a third to a quarter-ish of the passing down work. The big concern in college was that, we never saw him catch the ball. But, we know that he can. It's just they didn't use him like that up in Michigan State. So Ken Walker, moving forward, I think he can really go the distance to be a great running back moving forward. And this is the scary part. He is still not rostered in a ton of leagues. So he may still be available on your waiver wire.
Yeah, and this is one of those guys that a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Khalil Herbert maybe being that league-winning running back, and obviously that doesn't seem like the case anymore. And so we missed on that because I think I expected a little bit more of David Montgomery's injury to be more severe, and for Khalil Herbert to keep a role going forward. But this is one of those situations where Ken Walker is the guy. Ken Walker is the guy. I know that they have DJ Dallas and Travis Homer and other players that might get a little bit of involvement, but Ken Walker's the guy. They put the early draft capital on him. He looks so good on the field. He had an explosive 69-yard run. Nice. And this is something that he was doing in college. He led all rookies in runs of 20 yards or more from this draft class. Now, it's not all sunshine and rainbows for the Seahawks and for Ken Walker. They do have actually one of the, I'd say, more difficult schedules, the 10th toughest schedule remaining. So he's not a surefire home run. But this is one of those players that if he's on your waivers, this is one of those where you drop the bag. You're dropping, as the kids say, but you're dropping like 70% of your fab on a player like this. Because and I know we're doubling down on this early in the season, but this is the kind of player that wins you your season. A guy that can be a consistent RB2, sometimes even an RB1 on certain weeks because of the usage that's going to be there and the talent that's going to be there. The Seahawks offense is so much better than we thought. They're running more plays now than we thought. They're going faster. They're in scoring position way more often. And for me right now, Ken Walker, he's going to be my RB15 for the rest of the season. I have him sandwiched between a couple of other rookie running backs that we'll talk about here shortly. That's a professional tease. Vig, let's get to our third player, and it's Jalen Hurts, quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Man, is there a more polarizing player recently in fantasy football than Jalen Hurts? There's the whole, he could be a good fantasy quarterback. He could be a real quarterback for his team too. He's bad at both. He's good at one, not at the other, all this sort of stuff. But let's just throw all of that discourse out the window and just talk about the facts for the moment. 5 weeks in, he has 10 touchdowns on the season, but only 4 of them are passing, which is great for fantasy perspective. And honestly, the way his team is playing, we can't really complain about their record either. They're 5-0. But he has now gone 3 games without a passing touchdown. So, if you're an AJ Brown, Devontae Smith sort of, fantasy manager, then maybe that hurts you a little bit. Philadelphia as a whole is 24th out of 32 in passing attempts and 21st in passing touchdowns. But as far as their yards, they're getting 9th in passing yards and 2nd total offense, 3rd in red zone efficiency. So they're not passing a lot, but when they do well. And when they are in the end zone, they're doing really well. But here's the question we always love to ask, right? We always say, they've done this for so long. How long does this continue? Do we get sort of some sort of regression from his rushing touchdowns? Is he going to continue to average 1 to 1.5 rushing touchdowns a game? I really don't know. The way they're utilizing him and the way that he's playing, I think he continues to get rushing touchdowns. It's just really hard. But moving forward, they had the easiest strength of schedule for wide receivers, and they have the 11th easiest, strength of schedule for quarterbacks, though I guess for typical quarterbacks, not necessarily for quarterbacks who play like Jalen Hurts. So overall, what do you make of all of this sort of data that I'm putting together for you? How does it make you feel?
It makes me really confused. I think that we can definitely be comfortable with Jalen Hurts. Okay. Like I'll say it right now is that I was way too low on Jalen Hurts going into the season because I didn't think that this was something that could sustain this running ability that he's scoring so often. I still have questions about that. I think it's only logical to have questions that, right now he's on pace for 20 rushing touchdowns and just 14 passing touchdowns. If he stays at that pace, he's going to hit these kind of crazy historic highs and lows for starting quarterbacks that are going to be fantasy superstars. And so I think it's reasonable to have these questions. There's not a high passing volume here. There is a high efficiency. When do these things start to regress to the mean? And I think these are questions that we need to be able to ask. So far for Jalen Hurts, right? He is a top 5 quarterback and expected fantasy points added. Okay. That means that anytime that he is involved with a play, he is getting more expected fantasy points, more fantasy points than expected. And he's top 5 amongst QBs in that. Okay, he's had 6 rushing touchdowns in the last 5 games to start this season. Cam Newton had 14 in 2011, Vig. That's the most ever by a quarterback. And he finished as the QB4. Remember, I mentioned Hurts is on pace now for 20 rushing touchdowns. I think it's just crazy. It's crazy. It's very hard to comprehend. I think it's just easy to say that he has that safe rushing floor, and I think that you have to just keep him as a top 5 quarterback the rest of the league. The rest of the way through the season. But there are things that do worry me, and it's the worst. He has one of the worst touchdown rates passing in the league, behind Baker Mayfield and Davis Mills. This past week against the Arizona Cardinals, Jalen Hurts threw 13 wide receiver screens, most by any quarterback in a game in 5 years. And so these are the things that you start to wonder, because the more success he has, the more he's going to be in the news. And the more he's just going to become this enigma that nobody can figure out, but then everyone is going to be trying to figure out. And every defense is going to try to find different ways to stop him. And maybe they can't. Maybe he's Lamar Jackson-esque and he has one of those fantasy MVP type seasons and nobody can stop his running ability. But I think that seeing what he had to do this week with all those wide receiver screens, there is a potential here that there is a little bit of regression, that defenses do start to figure him out. I'm just so curious as to where this goes. It's hard for me to have a strong opinion on it, positive or negative, because I think that it's just, he is what he is. He's going to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback. This to me is just such an interesting case study because I don't know where he's going to be. I do think that eventually Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes do start to elevate above him. Herbert has the easiest strength of schedule the rest of the year. Patrick Mahomes has been looking good and he's getting used to this new wide receiver core. He's been running a little bit more and Mahomes has been the quarterback 4 already. So I do think that there's an avenue where both those guys kind of end up ahead of him, but Jalen Hurts, I think safely top 5 quarterback, despite how confusing this situation is. And that's not to mention, by the way, we're seeing a lot of ups and downs with his wide receivers. Vig, I mean, this started with AJ Brown being the guy getting all the targets, and then it switched over to Devontae Smith. Not to mention he's been supporting Dallas Goedert. So now we've got 3 players that we talked about how Geno Smith is funneling targets to his wide receivers. Jalen Hurts is doing the same. So I want to know like what ends up happening when some of these targets get taken away and how will he adjust? Let's get to our 4th player, and it's Gabe Davis.
Holy cow, Gabe Davis. Look, I got to say this. Gabe Davis was on a lot of benches last week, right? And he had like the greatest game he's ever had from a fantasy standpoint. And obviously you're going to start him next week and everyone is, and don't be surprised if he doesn't. But that's just, again, this is fantasy football. It is a pain. I'm in a lot of leagues where folks did not start Gabe Davis or they did start him for multiple weeks. They benched him last week because they weren't sure what was going to happen. And of course he blew up, but he had this Randy Moss-esque game where he had 3 receptions, 171 yards, 2 touchdowns, started the game off with like 17 PPR points on a 98-yard touchdown play. Look, it is really hard to know what is going to happen. The talent was undeniable. We always knew Gabe Davis had the talent, but we were always worried, right? The dude was playing through an ankle injury, but over 2 healthy games and getting less than 20%, the guy's getting like a 16% target share. He's averaged 25 PPR points per game. He's had 3 multi-touchdown games in his last 9 starts, going back to last season and including the playoffs where really he had this like breakout game. And in that 9-game span, he's got you 10 total receiving touchdowns. It is, again, we have never denied that Gabe Davis has had the talent. And I think this is just another case study of how frustrating fantasy football can be, because I saw Gabe Davis on a lot of different benches. Thankfully, none of them were my own this last week, but I placed him on the bench before on a game where he really could have blown up. But look, at this point, I think everyone's question is this, Alfredo. If I have Gabe Davis, do I just have to start him every week? Do I put him on the bench? Like, that's what listeners want to know. So what do we do with Gabe Davis?
I think you have to. I think you have to be starting him each week because it's the Bills, right? It's Josh Allen. I don't think it's one of those players where you're saying, oh, it's matchup dependent or game script dependent. Josh Allen throws, whether they're winning, whether they're losing, doesn't matter. And he's always a threat for a big play. I think that if you drafted Gabe Davis high, you drafted him with the understanding of what he was going to be. There is going to be this roller coaster throughout the season. He was never going to be this high volume guy, unless, of course, there's some sort of injury to Stephon Diggs, God forbid. But, this is a player that I think that everyone had these expectations going in. He's going to have these blow up games, and then he's going to have games where he disappears. Now, so far, the games where he has, quote, disappeared have been when he's hurt. He's been recovering from that ankle injury. The ankle looks fine. He was running around really well. I think it doesn't matter at this point. Like, I think he doesn't have to be consistent. It doesn't have to be conventional, but Gabe Davis needs to be in your starting lineup each week. So for me, for the rest of the season, he's my wide receiver 24 because I think he needs to always be in that wide receiver 2 conversation, regardless of the target share, regardless of the volume. All you have to look at is just that one play, 98-yard, long touchdown. That's all you need from a guy like Gabe Davis. And he can absolutely change your entire week. When a player on just a couple of plays can win you your entire week, he needs to be started every week. I think it's that simple. Let's get to our 5th player here, and it's George Pickens, the wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And This has been a lot of fun to watch because I think that everyone got really excited about George Pickens early in the preseason, myself included, and we loved him going through the draft process, Vig. Over the last 2 games, Pickens has been showing up as a legitimate NFL wide receiver. 8 targets, at least 71 yards in both those games. And over the last 3 games, he's had over 7 targets per game. Now, from weeks 1 through 4, his target share had gone up every week. This last week, it didn't keep going up, but it kind of just sustained right there in the 20s. Over the last 2 weeks, he's been the wide receiver 16 in PPR. Now, I'm not suggesting that he is going to be some world beater or that this Pittsburgh Steelers offense is any good, but this is a player that is showing over these past 2 weeks with the change in quarterback to Kenny Pickett that he demands our attention as a potential wide receiver 2 going forward. What are your thoughts here with George Pickens?
Look, this is not at all surprising to anyone who watched him. And, if you watch the college football landscape, there were some like behavior or other, off the field concerns that were brought up. There was an injury concern, but we saw him come back in the national championship game. If you had listened to Alfredo and I previously in any of the other shows we talked about, we loved his landing spot. We loved George Pickens' talent. And we said that though he was falling further and further behind due to whatever concerns, that this was a rookie that absolutely was within the rookie wide receiver 1 conversation. Because his talent was there, and we've seen him pull off like some just stupid plays, like the little one-handed grab where he catches the ball just at the end. So we knew the talent was there, but we needed to see how would he fit into this system. And we didn't know at some point, was it going to be Trubisky or Pickett? But now we have Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett clearly trusts Pickens a lot. Pickett is throwing the ball a lot more. I think we're going to see a lot more pass attempts moving forward. Yes, the Steelers only have a couple of passing touchdowns, and of those, Pickett has 0. But still then, they are giving you a quarterback 2. Last 2 weeks, Pickett's sort of been the quarterback 20. At some point, you really got to believe that this volume's going to, suggest that there's going to be a regression to the mean on those passing touchdowns, meaning hopefully we will see more of those. And Pickens should be more involved in those plays. But even without the touchdowns, he's doing really, really well. And here's the crazy part. In ESPN leagues, Pickens is still available in about half of them. So he's someone you could still pick up. You could, I just don't understand. He's not present, or, I can't draft him in any of the leagues I'm in or pick him up on the waiver or use the fab. Maybe just telling about the kind of guys I play with. But he is Alfredo's wide receiver 30 for the rest of the season. Now, before we go into what that means, Alfredo, why should we even care about your rankings? Are you any good at this stuff? Are you ranked at all highly in any of this?
No, I'm not
about your ranking. Why am I caring about your rankings? You keep telling me that this is your wide receiver 24. This is your wide receiver 30. Why should the listeners care at all about your rookie or whatever rankings?
No, I'm not very good at any of this stuff, actually. So, Vig, I genuinely appreciate what you're doing. I get awkward with like compliments, but so last week, week 4, actually ended up being number 2 in accuracy rankings for start sit, and so I mean, like, if a blind squirrel gets an
out of like 1,300 people on Fantasy Pros who are considered
no,
sir,
ranking. It's not that many, but like a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. Okay, like there's some times where I will be accurate, but I do come from the college scouting background. And listen, I loved George Pickens coming in. This was a guy that I don't think anyone questioned his talent. There was questions about the usage at Georgia, and there was questions about the knee injury and how that would progress going forward. All of it's fine. He's got the usage here in Pittsburgh. He's getting the target share. Kenny Pickett just threw the ball 52 times. Okay. There is an absolute changing of the guard here in Pittsburgh, and Pickens is healthy. So I really see him. He's proven that he can be a wide receiver 2 on a consistent basis, at least for these last 2 weeks. It's small sample size. I get that. But I think that you have to consider him as a wide receiver 3 going forward. And he's probably going to be really expensive to try to get in your leagues. So this is one of those that if you have him, I would just hold on to him because this is the kind of guy that can win you your league. Let's talk about another rookie. There's a lot of rookies in this episode. And it just seems like after there was a lot of talk about how this was such a bad rookie class and people should be passing on it and going into next season, it shows us how much we really don't know. Because we've had George Pickens, Chris Olave, Ken Walker, and now Breece Hall. Breece Hall is another rookie who has been making a huge impact. Vig, talk to me about Breece Hall and why he is one of the 10 most important players in fantasy football going forward.
All right. And we're going to go a little faster through our last 5 players. But in general, Breece Hall, again, we never doubted his talent. We never denied that there was going to be, that he had the opportunity to play really well. It was really the Jets team and the offense that had us really, confused about things. But over the last 2 weeks, he has been the RB7 on a PPR basis. He had a season high of nearly 70% of the snaps. He had 69%. He averaged a little under half, around 43% of rush attempts the first 3 weeks, and nearly 65% of the Jets' rush attempts over the last 2 weeks. And the worry was always, what are they going to do with Michael Carter? He is now finally out-touching Michael Carter 20-12, though Carter is still, kind of being a goal line vulture. It happened twice last week. So the utilization is finally getting there for Breece Hall. And the Jets, let's be honest, did have a bit of an outlier game. Yes, Breece Hall absolutely blew up, but they were playing against a third-string quarterback on the Miami Dolphins. The game script was not how folks had predicted. If this was Tua playing, things would have been very different. But Zach Wilson had 21 pass attempts and 18 actual targets if you take away just throwaways. And over the last 2 weeks, just 4 receptions for Breece Hall. So one of these plays was a broken coverage that led to a 79-yard touchdown that obviously gets you, 8 + 6, 14, like 15 points on a single play. But are there still concerns with Breece Hall? Is he just a plug and play every week? Am I starting him no matter what, Alfredo?
Vig, that was a broken coverage that broke my heart. Yes. So Breece Hall, I have been kind of dubbed the Breece Hall hater simply because I had Ken Walker over him in the pre-draft rankings, and then I had concerns about the New York Jets offense, which
pre-draft dynasty rankings. I hate to interrupt you, but we got to clarify.
Yes, pre-draft dynasty rankings. Excuse me. But I don't think it's crazy to have concerns about the Jets offense. It's not that long ago, just a couple weeks ago, we were all really excited about Garrett Wilson. And then, 5 weeks ago, at the beginning of the season, we were all really excited about Elijah Moore. And then even just last week, we're all really excited about Tyler Conklin. And it's kind of like one by one, these players are dropping off and not being as fantasy relevant. And I think it's because we don't know. I don't think the Jets know what their identity is at this point. And when you see teams that don't have an identity, they kind of just lean on some of these broken plays and whenever they happen, and it really just changes the game script for them. And we saw that they got a defensive touchdown. Breece Hall did look very good. He looked very good. And I do see him as my running back 16 rest of season. Okay. He is a high end RB2 rest of season, but I still think it's fair to have concerns about the Jets offense. Okay. Miami was down to their quarterback 3, missing both of their offensive tackles, missing both of their corners. Like you mentioned, Vig, this is a game script that the Jets likely won't see a whole lot. And the Jets schedule gets tougher going forward. The 8th toughest for quarterbacks, 4th toughest for running backs, and 3rd toughest for wide receivers. So I think there's a way that we could see the Jets kind of, I don't want to say fizzle out here, but man, they're going to have to find their identity fast. And if it's Breece Hall, then that's awesome. And Breece Hall is going to become a top 12 running back. But if they don't, I'm a little concerned. And I might sound stupid doubling down on this, but I still think that we might be seeing some of the highest points of Breece Hall's rookie year because of how bad this Jets offense could be around him. Let's get to our 7th player here, and it's Dameon Pierce, a running back who's surrounded by a bad offense, but it doesn't matter. He's been really, really good.
Dude, we love this, right? We've been talking about Dameon Pierce since the rookie draft, and we didn't
stop
love
with
how
that
he was
nickname.
utilized.
You called him Dameon Fierce. I will not be added to that moniker.
All right, well, I called him Dameon Pierce, and he was fierce, as he should be the winner of Kyle Burns' Angry Run of the Week, as he literally bulldozed his way at high speed through the Jacksonville Jaguars defense. It was a blistering run, and he just nothing could take him down. But anyway, I'm going to stick to calling him Dameon Fierce because I always knew this is what he was going to be and what he was capable of, and I'll double down on it. We just, Gainesville didn't really utilize him very well. At this point, Pierce is 3rd in rush yards over expectations among running backs with at least 60 attempts. So again, analysts put all their fancy data together and expect you to get certain rush yards. He's 3rd, in getting above that expectation. He is 2nd in the broken tackle rate. His yards after contact per carry, his team red zone carries 2nd everywhere. He's 3rd in team carries inside the 10-yard line. So this guy is always a goal line threat, and seeing how he runs, I mean, just look, he has great vision, great contact balance, keeps a low center of gravity, all these like buzzwords that you love to hear. But if you watch him play, that's what he does. He is so good. He's patient too. I see him sometimes waiting for the play to develop. So Dameon Fierce is playing outstanding and has done really, really well over the last couple of weeks. But here's the question. What do I do with this actionable stuff? This was like a lousy Jags team that did not play as well as they should have. Is this an every week Dameon Pierce thing? Usually you got to go with a good running back on a great offense. He's a good running back on a miserable offense. What do I do with this enigma of Dameon Pierce? Or is it an enigma?
I don't think it is, man, because this is data that we're seeing over time. This has not been something that it just happened this 1 week or the last 2 weeks or with a quarterback change or anything like that. So over the last 2 weeks, though, Dameon Pierce has been the running back 5 in PPR. Okay, he's had 3 consecutive top 10 finishes at the running back position, and Pierce is one of 9 running backs to rush for at least 400 yards in their first 5 games since the year 2000. Okay, we're talking about a player that's doing something that hasn't been done a lot just in the history of the NFL, at least recent history. And the big thing here is he's getting volume. In this past game against the Jaguars, 31 opportunities. The Texans want to run the offense through him. I think they're coming to this conclusion that Davis Mills is not very good. And if they want to kind of try to keep games close and somehow try to win games, they need to control the pace of the games. And they're keeping their slow offense on the field by letting Dameon Pierce just grind away at defenses. And it looks like it's going to continue. They've got the 5th easiest remaining strength of schedule for running backs. He is my RB14. He is, for me, right now, highest amongst all of these rookie running backs. I think that he is borderline RB1 material, high-end RB2, which is weird to say for a Texans team and a 4th-round running back, but Dameon Pierce is just proving everybody wrong, and I absolutely love it. Let's get to our 8th player, and it's Tom Brady, quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Not a rookie.
Got to start with saying that Dameon Pierce was not proving me wrong. But anyway, I'm just kidding. Tom Brady, there was fantasy managers who rostered Tom Brady or drafted him had reason to be frustrated, right? In the first 3 weeks, he wasn't even a QB2. He was a QB 28. But we all know that Tom Brady has a talent, right? Undeniable. The greatest quarterback of all
He's
time.
pretty
Over
good.
the last 2 weeks, he's been the QB3 per PFF. Bucks have had the toughest schedule, or if not one of the toughest schedules so far to date. And we've seen him had to do this without, for a variety of reasons between injury and suspension, without Mike Evans, without Godwin, without Julio Jones. And, Godwin left the game early, most likely thought to be due to sort of injury management. In week 3, he's throwing the ball to the now retired Cole Beasley, Scotty Miller, Brashad Perryman, and Russell Gage. So, he's been doing what he's doing over the last couple of weeks without even his full squadron and full wide receiver core. But, Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White are continuing to get targets with a pretty high efficiency, and BT dubs, Rachaad, which is what cool kids say for, by the way, I'm trying to get cool with the lingo. Rachaad White is still available in about a third of Yahoo leagues and a little over a third in ESPN leagues as of this morning. So, do I panic with Tom Brady, Alfredo? Do I feel better now? And do I begin to, start him more regularly in a 1 quarterback or even super flex league?
I think the thing is that now we're seeing that after those injuries to the offensive line, Tom Brady is going for some more efficient passing and getting the ball out quicker. And I think that was something he had to kind of get reacclimated to. Now there's a new coaching staff in there. And, it's been quite a ride early on in the season. The Bucs are 11th in pass attempts, 12th in passing yards, but then they're 22nd in passing touchdowns, 21st in red zone conversion percentage. Things just, they haven't been falling the Buccaneers' way. And even this past week, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin both get stopped short of the end zone, which could have been 2 more touchdowns for Tom Brady. We could have seen an absolute blow-up game from him. Listen, he's got the 13th easiest strength of schedule for a quarterback, which 13th doesn't sound all that great, but for a guy like Tom Brady with the weapons he has, a team that's going to be playing really well throughout the rest of the season, he's my quarterback 8 rest of the season. I think that Tom Brady and that Buccaneers offense could really be helping a lot of fantasy managers. All right, let's get to our final 2 players, Vig here, and we're talking about number 9, David Njoku, tight end for the Cleveland Browns.
The tight end position has always just been such a difficult one to find any semblance of consistency outside of the top players. And we talked about Kyle Pitts before, presumed a top player, but that's been another disaster. Basically, the tight end landscape has been a wasteland. You have some top guys who are relatively consistent, and then it's pick your poison. You have no idea if they're going to be good or not for any given week. But David Njoku's averaging a 90% snap share. And we've talked about this last week. Around 80% is usually the threshold for elite usage. And as far as how many targets he's getting about 1 in 5 targets are thrown his way over the last 4 games. Jacoby Brissett likes to throw him the ball. He's a top 5 tight end in the last 2 of the 3 games. And since week 2 overall, and this is kind of exciting news for folks who listened to Alfredo early on, who's, I think Alfredo said week 1 or 2, grab David Njoku while you can. He is the tight end 3 since week 2 in a PPR league. And here's the scary part. He is still available in a lot of waiver wire. So this is like an auto try to grab him, right, Alfredo?
Yeah, he's one of these players that it's just, if you go and grab him before you miss the boat. I mean, he's on pace right now for over 80 receptions, 980 yards. He's going to have, he's on pace for a fantastic rest of the season. This is something that we saw Jacoby Brissett likes to target the tight end, and ride this wave for as long as you can, until Deshaun Watson gets back. But I don't see it as something where all of a sudden he's going to stop getting this usage. Okay. Cleveland is a tight end friendly squad, and David Njoku is the guy that got paid like the top tight end. He's my tight end 7 for the rest of the season. Now, they do have a little bit of a tough schedule for the tight end, but this is one of those teams that I just don't think it matters. He is an every week starter at the tight end spot because of how bad that position is and how much Cleveland wants to use the tight end. Let's get to our final player, and it's Travis Etienne, running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Vig, this should make you happy.
It does. It does. So look, I said this before. Last week, we got some YouTube comment flack for our take that it can be hard to know to do with the Jacksonville Jaguars. As a fan, I love it, right? Love having Travis Etienne and James Robinson. But the concern that was brought up to us is, guys, like, I can't believe you would dare to say that James Robinson isn't the RB1 week in and week out, and he's going to be the best. And this is the problem with sort of like having these takes that you just wish are always going to be true. You have to move with the data. And James Robinson, as fantastic as he is, his snap rate has decreased in 4 straight games. The Jags were winning a lot of games. It made sense that he would be utilized a lot, but we're sort of regressing back to where we thought the Jags are, which is a pretty darn awful team who gave the Texans their first win. The efficiency is getting worse for James Robinson. Etienne played the bulk of the snaps. He had a season high 55% of snaps last week, and an 11% target share, including all the wide receivers and tight ends in week 5. And so we are slowly seeing, and I'm not saying this is the trend that's going to continue. James Robinson is sort of on his way down a little bit, and Travis Etienne's usage is on his way up, both in the running and passing game. And I'm not saying this is going to continue. My take is that it is going to continue to fluctuate on a week-to-week basis, and I cannot trust either of these folks to be the absolute like RB1 on that squad for any given week, which for me puts them both in sort of an RB3 flex conversation for the rest of the season, barring any like major changes. Does that sound reasonable to you, or what's your take on this, Alfredo?
I do think that if there's a glimmer of hope, it's for Travis Etienne because of that explosive ability. I think that right now, the way he's getting used is interesting. He's got an average depth of target over 2 yards, which that's one of those things that when you are looking at all like, the nerdy stats, running backs that catch passes down the field, that means that they tend to be the first reads. It means that play is developed for them, whether they're running a Texas route or whatever, they're doing to get them in a one-on-one matchup against a linebacker. That means that play is drawn up for them. It's not just like a little swing pass. It's not a dump off. It's not something where the quarterback panicked. This is a play designed for that player. And Doug Peterson after last game actually said he wants to give the ball to Travis Etienne more. He wants to get that ball to him. And we're starting to see that kind of slowly. So Vig, I have been holding out hope for Travis Etienne, and I think that we're going to get there. I think it's going to be little by little. I don't think that we're going to get this top 15 running back that we had all hoped for, but I think that there is a potential that we could see him eventually get into that top 24 and be the RB2 that people drafted him to be. Right now, I've got him as my running back 29 for the rest of the season, just because of the uncertainty that you mentioned with James Robinson, with this offense. We don't know what we're going to get. But I will say this, Jacksonville has the easiest remaining strength of schedule for running backs. So that could lend to a little bit more of slowing down the pace. I don't know what we're going to see, if that means, more explosive plays from Etienne, more explosive plays from James Robinson. But I will say this, I'm excited for what it means for the Jacksonville Jaguars and Travis Etienne. That's it for us today. Thank you so much for listening all the way through. These are our 10 most important players in the fantasy football landscape. Every Monday, we're going to keep bringing you these episodes wherever you get your podcast and here on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment down below for any of your week 6 questions. For myself, for Dr. Vig, adios.